The true story of the ceiling intruder. It started with something small. The man, whose name has been lost to time, was a 57-year-old living alone in Fukuoka, Japan. His apartment was modest but cozy, a single-bedroom unit with a small kitchen, living room, and bathroom. It wasn't much, but it was his. A place of peace after long days of work. But something was off. At first he noticed little changes. Things weren't where he had left them, the rice cooker lid was slightly ajar, an open carton of milk sat on the counter when he was sure he'd put it back in the fridge. These were minor annoyances, the kind you chalk up to forgetfulness. I'm getting old, he told himself. Then, there was the food. His rice seemed to run out faster than usual. Half-eaten snacks appeared on his kitchen counter. At first, he blamed himself. Maybe I forgot to throw it away? But it kept happening. He started to track it. He'd buy a fresh loaf of bread and count the slices. The next day, one would be gone. Something's coming in while I'm at work, he thought. The idea chilled him to the core. To catch the thief, he installed a small security camera in his kitchen, positioned to face the countertop. It wasn't much, just a small Wi-Fi-enabled camera that linked to his phone. He expected to catch a neighbor or maybe even a maintenance worker sneaking in. What he discovered was far, far worse. The next morning, after his shift, he checked the footage. He sat down with his phone in hand, skimming through the hours of still, empty video. Nothing. Just his quiet kitchen, dimly lit by a street lamp outside. He fast-forwarded. Hours passed. Then, movement. His finger froze on the screen. Slowly, he rewound the footage and played it at a normal speed. At 1:34 a.m., the camera picked up something in the background. The kitchen vent, a small square grate on the ceiling, moved. It shifted just slightly, tilting at an odd angle. Then, something horrifying happened. A hand emerged. Long, thin fingers wrapped around the edge of the vent. The man gasped, his heart racing. He stared at the screen, unable to believe what he was seeing. It wasn't fast, it wasn't sudden, it was slow and deliberate. The vent was pushed aside, revealing a dark, gaping hole in the ceiling. And from that hole, a head emerged. Wild, matted hair, a face smudged with dirt. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, scanned the room like an animal searching for prey. She moved slowly, as if she had done this 100 times before. Her arm slithered out next, followed by her thin body. She didn't drop to the floor, she climbed down slowly, using the sides of the wall as leverage, moving with a strange, spider-like grace. The man sat in horror as he watched this figure, this woman, crawl down into his kitchen. She was small, frail-looking, wearing clothes that were tattered and dirty. Her head turned toward the camera, her eyes locked onto it. He nearly dropped his phone, but she didn't react. She didn't care. She moved past it like it wasn't there. For the next 30 minutes, he watched as the woman moved silently through his home. She opened his refrigerator, eating a bit of rice directly from the container. She sipped milk straight from the carton. Then she wiped her mouth on her sleeve. At one point, she stopped. She tilted her head, listening. Her head snapped toward the hallway leading to his bedroom. For a moment, she just stood there, her head cocked at a sharp, unnatural angle, eyes fixed on something out of view. Then, slowly, she moved toward it. He remembered that moment vividly. His blood ran cold. That's my bedroom. Shaking, he called the police. He could barely get his words out. There's something living in my ceiling. She came down. I have footage. His voice cracked with panic. At first, the police were skeptical. Cases of intruders sneaking into homes were rare, but not unheard of. Sometimes, burglars would hide inside homes during robberies. But this? Someone living in the house? The police arrived 15 minutes later. They searched the apartment while he stood outside, trembling, his eyes darting toward the roof. She's still up there. She's still up there. The officers checked the vents but found nothing. One officer knocked on the ceiling, hollow. Another climbed a ladder and shined his flashlight inside. His face twisted into a grimace. "It's a crawl space," the officer muttered, "barely big enough for a person." "Check it," the man urged. "She's in there." The officer climbed up, flashlight in one hand, the other gripping the edge of the opening. Dust fell as he pulled himself inside. For a moment, there was silence. Then a shout. "Got her! She's here! She's running!" There was a brief scuffle, loud banging sounds, then the officer's muffled voice. "Stop moving. Get down." A second officer climbed up. Minutes later, they pulled her down. Her hair was wild, her face gaunt. Her hands were scratched raw from clawing at wood and metal. Her eyes were sunken, her clothes filthy. She didn't struggle, she didn't scream, she just stared. The man watched in shock. She was here the whole time. The woman was identified as a 58-year-old homeless drifter. She had no family, no known residents, and no prior arrest. She had been living in a ceiling for nearly a year. According to reports, she had entered through an unlocked door or window and discovered the small crawl space above his apartment. From there, she survived by coming down at night to steal food and water. She had even fashioned a small sleeping area inside the crawl space. Old blankets, bits of trash, and food wrappers. The idea that someone could live in his home for a year without being noticed haunted him. "I never heard her, not once," he told reporters. "I only noticed that I started losing food." The man never stayed in that apartment again. The story made headlines across Japan. People were horrified by the idea that someone could be living right above them, unseen, unheard, just watching. Security camera sales spiked. Tenants in older apartments started checking their ceiling vents. People began locking their windows, sealing attic access points, and installing motion sensors. But for some, it was too late. Similar cases surfaced. In 2013, a man in the US discovered his ex-girlfriend had been living in his attic for 2 weeks after they broke up. In South Korea, a family heard strange noises in their walls, only to discover a man had been living in a hidden space between the walls. The idea of hidden people isn't just a ghost story. It's real, and it happens more often than you think. There's something primal about the fear of being watched. The idea that someone could see you in your most vulnerable moments, sleeping, showering, eating, is deeply unsettling. But this story goes deeper. The intruder didn't just watch. She lived there. She moved through his space, ate his food, and crept around his home while he slept, just feet away. Think about it. When you hear a bump at night, you assume it's a creak in the floorboards. When food goes missing, you blame yourself. But what if it's not the house settling? What if it's them? What if right now there's someone watching you from a vent, from a crawl space, from a hollow part of your home you didn't know existed? And when you fall asleep tonight, they'll crawl down. Quiet, careful, and hungry.